Each new generation born is in effect an invasion of civilization by little barbarians, who must be civilized before it is too late. Thomas Sowell. This is Citadelium, Episode 3, and I'm your host, Yuri Degaya. Last time we touched upon the topic of politics and how you can view politics from a slightly different angle through the lens of private property rights. Today I want to expand a little bit on the topic and show you that the ideas that I explained last time are not usually represented in today's political arena. If you remember from the previous episode, I divided people into two categories. The first is people who respect private property rights, and the second, people who don't respect private property rights. That is, people who want to take your stuff from you forcibly. Now, if we had to label people who don't want to take your stuff, who respect property rights, what would we call them? Well, throughout history there have been many different labels attached to such people, and the most popular ones are anarcho-capitalists, libertarians, classical liberals. So in politics, liberalism has actually been associated with people who respect property rights and who are also in favor of minimizing the role of the government in people's lives. However, we can see, especially throughout the 20th century, that the term liberal has been pretty much hijacked by far-left ideologies and movements. So, to distinguish between them and people who actually respect property rights, a new term was coined, libertarianism. So, right now, pretty much everybody who think of themselves as freedom thinking, freedom fighting, and private property right fighting individuals, they choose the term libertarian over liberal. As for me, I prefer the term natural order. I picked up this term from Hans Hermann Hoppe's book, Democracy, the God That Failed. Why do I like the term natural order? Well, it's pretty simple to me. The words natural and the words order are very meaningful because, you see, I think that we have to strive to be as close to the nature as possible, and we have to follow natural laws as close as possible in order for our civilization to advance, and this term explains it very well and succinctly. There's another reason for that, is that I believe that libertarianism itself as a movement has also been, to an extent, hijacked by nefarious individuals and influences. In libertarianism, you have to distinguish between two things. First is libertarianism as a movement, which is essentially what I described before, a movement of individuals who are for freedom of association, the non-aggression principle, and private property rights. The second is the Libertarian Party, or libertarian parties in different countries. This is a more politicized movement. Of course, it's more organized and it has a clear objective in terms of politics. They actually want to get into the government and implement their policies on the government level. And I find it strange sometimes that libertarians would use the democratic procedures and the democratic platform to actually further their goals by organizing actual political parties. The reason for that is that the ultimate goal of every libertarian is actually to make sure that democracy does not persist. However, I think we've seen some interesting experiments with that, and a lot of people are very grateful to individuals like Ron Paul in the United States, who have enlightened them on the benefits of thinking in the libertarian way. Even though the Libertarian Party in the United States haven't achieved much, really, they have educated a lot of young people on the merits of thinking in anarcho-capitalist, libertarian and classical liberal ways. So when I mentioned that libertarianism has been infiltrated by people who want to contribute to the process of decivilization, what do I really mean by that? To answer this question, I think we first have to understand what the process of civilization actually is. I think the most important feature of the process of civilization has to do with an economic term that has been recently popularized by Saifedean Ammous in the book The Bitcoin Standard and has become very popular in the Bitcoin community in general. That term is time preference. What does time preference mean? Let's refer to Wikipedia. In economics, time preference is the current relative valuation placed on receiving a good at an earlier date compared with receiving it at a later date. There is no absolute distinction that separates high and low time preference, only comparisons with others, either individually or in aggregate. What it means in practical terms is that you as an individual value your future more than the present time. Let me give you a few examples of low time preference and high time preference. When we deal with finances, for example, savings is a low time preference behavior, while consumption and spending is high time preference behavior. In nutrition, eating junk food to get this instant gratification is high time preference behavior. Eating healthy food is low time preference behavior because you look out for your future self. You know that if you eat healthy in the future, your body will thank you. In family matters, starting a family and having children and raising them is essentially looking out for your own future, because those children will eventually grow up and take care of you. This is low time preference behavior, as opposed to high time preference behavior where you don't care about creating a family and you just play around and do whatever you want out there on the street, and that contributes absolutely nothing to the development of your future self and of your future family situation. As mentioned in the definition, there is no clear line between low time preference and high time preference. It's more of a scale, and as individuals and even families and even societies, we move from left to the right of the scale, from higher time preference to the lower time preference in our behaviors and our daily choices, and that is something we just have to work on. Obviously, the direction that we have to work on is lowering our time preference so that we can look out for the future, think about what we're going to leave as our legacy. So why do I say that time preference plays such a huge role in the process of civilization? Well, what kind of images do you have when I say the word civilization? A lot of the people will invoke images of buildings from the ancient empires, for example, the Colosseum or the Acropolis in Greece. Think about what the architects of those buildings had in mind when they designed them and when they later supervised their construction. Obviously, they wanted to leave a legacy, and they wanted those constructions to last for generations, for centuries or even millennia. Clearly, they succeeded because right now we can travel to those countries and see those buildings right there. What it tells us is that people who designed those buildings really looked out for the future. They wanted their children and the children of their children to enjoy those magnificent constructions. Compare it to the structures that we get today. For example, a regular house today is only good for about 40-50 years, after which it is destroyed and a new one is erected in its place. Because right now, the goal is to make everything cheap and last only for a generation or two so that it can be replaced later for the next generations to come. The goal is not to build something that lasts. The goal is to satisfy the consumption needs of today. Even the skyrises and the glass towers of today, do you think they will last for generations and will be enjoyed by our descendants thousands of years afterwards? I doubt so. So this concept of time preference can be seen pretty much in every facet of our lives. And the rule of thumb here is quite simple. The lower the time preference of man, the much more he contributes to civilization. This is why concepts like family, culture, and tradition are always associated with high civilization. The explanation for that is very simple. These concepts are low time preference. In your family, you look after your children. You look out for the future of your family. In culture and tradition, you look out for your people, and you want them to have something that they can pass from generation to generation, something that they can share on a cultural, traditional, spiritual level. Conversely, we can say that people who are against developing such features of society are high time preference people and are actually against civilization itself. They are decivilizing forces in our society. So if you promote junk food instead of a healthy diet, if you promote a promiscuous lifestyle instead of starting a family, or if you promote the destruction of cultural and traditional values, you contribute to the decivilization of society. Well, let's talk about family. A libertarian will argue that your body, your choice. And this is consistent with what I said in my previous episode when I said that the right to private property is the ultimate right, and the ultimate manifestation of private property is your own body. Your body belongs to you, you're stuck with it until you die, so you have the right to do anything you want with your body, including putting anything you want in it and doing and providing any services with it if you wish. So then the libertarian will go, well, if your body, your choice, it means that prostitutes have the right to sell their body for money. The concept here is correct and the libertarian is right. However, where the libertarian is wrong is in assuming that because something is conceptually correct, it has to be promoted as well. What do I mean by promotion? Well, some libertarians think that if, let's say, a prostitute has the right to her body and can do whatever she wishes with her body, including selling it for money, then this activity has to be promoted and actually lobbied for on the government level. Essentially, they want to legalize such activity and make it into a job. And while it is technically already a job on the black market, it's not legalized in very many jurisdictions. So here's where the point of contention is. You may say, well, Yuri, you believe that the government shouldn't really provide any services to people. It shouldn't really exist in the first place, and everything should be private. That includes that the body should not tell you what to do with your body. And now you're telling us that legalizing sex work and prostitution is not desirable. How does this compute? It is true that by not allowing prostitution to be legal, the government infringes upon the rights of prostitutes to their bodies. But remember, the process of civilization is a low time preference activity, while prostitution and using the services of prostitutes is a high time preference activity, which means that it does not promote civilization. So even if all the governments in the world make prostitution legal, this will not help us in any way to build civilization, which is our goal here. Well, Yuri, you're just a Puritan and you want to impose your morals on other people. Not really. What I'm arguing for is shifting the focus. If your focus is on legalizing prostitution, then you essentially promote it whether voluntarily or not. And I believe that some people do it voluntarily and purposefully. What I mean in terms of shifting the focus, instead of spending lots of energy, time, and money on lobbying the government to make sex work legal, how about you shift focus towards the prostitute herself and work on her psychologically? Because it has been proven that most of the time, prostitution was caused by a family condition, some kind of a trauma that happened in childhood. So this can be fixed, and if as much energy is directed at it as it is right now at legalizing such activities, then major shifts will happen. Whether you agree with this or not, I can say this. In a world of thousands of citadels, those citadels that are cultured and traditional will outperform any other citadel that is focused on high time preference behaviors like prostitution and gambling and drug abuse. Low time preference citadels will flourish because this has been shown over and over throughout history. Civilizations that put the future on the pedestal and cared about their future generations rose to power. Similarly, as soon as such civilizations started descending into degeneracy, they fell. So if you promote degeneracy in its many forms, and I think the 7 cardinal sins describe degeneracy pretty well, then you necessarily contribute to decivilization of our society. It is my belief that, unfortunately, the libertarian movement has been infiltrated by people who promote such activities on purpose in order to essentially attempt to stall the progress and stall the process of civilization by reversing it. You can reverse it, like I said, by promoting these high time preference behaviors, and this is exactly what we see happening. And this is not just my idea. Hans Hermann Hoppe spoke about it too. Let me read you an excerpt. Did this not imply that vulgarity, obscenity, profanity, drug use, promiscuity, pornography, prostitution, homosexuality, polygamy, pedophilia, or any other conceivable perversity or abnormality, insofar as they were victimless crimes, were no offenses at all, but perfectly normal and legitimate activities and lifestyles? Not surprisingly then, from the outset of the libertarian movement attracted an unusually high number of abnormal and perverse followers. Subsequently, the countercultural ambience and multicultural relativistic tolerance of the libertarian movement attracted even greater numbers of misfits, personal and professional failures, or plain losers. Murray Rothbard, in disgust, called them the nihilo-libertarians and identified them as modal libertarians. They fantasized of a society where everyone would be free to choose and cultivate whatever non-aggressive lifestyle, career, or character he wanted, and where, as a result of free market economics, everyone could do so on an elevated level of general prosperity. Ironically, the movement that had set out to dismantle the state and restore private property and market economics was largely appropriated and its appearance shaped by the mental and emotional products of the welfare state, the new class of permanent adolescents. As we can see, Hoppe doesn't mince words here. What I wanted to demonstrate is that just because in our new free society something becomes possible, doesn't mean it becomes desirable. Man is a creature of many talents, and it is by cultivating higher aspirations and low time preference that we can restart the engine of civilization. This is it for today, and I hope you learned something new about libertarianism, and maybe after this episode you will choose to use some other term for the concept, such as natural order, my favorite term. That said, don't forget to subscribe on my website, thegaia.co, and find Citadelium on many different platforms such as YouTube, Anchor.fm, BitChute, Spotify, and others. Thank you for tuning in, and see you next time.